The following is an AZPM original production.
For AZPM, I'm Mark McLemore, and this is an encore edition of Arizona Spotlight. Coming up, meet one of Tucson's brightest lights, Paula Holmes, who earlier this year celebrated her 100th birthday. Find out about a documentary about caring, aging, and faith called Vows. I'll talk with the director, Victoria Westover, and film essayist Chris DeShiel will share his thoughts on the documentary. And hop into the pond with stories that soar for the beginning of a relationship that seems meant to be in Rainbow Frog. Those stories are all coming up next on Arizona Spotlight. There are 8 billion people on the planet, but only 0.01% have reached the milestone age of 100. That's less than 1 million people. In March of this year, a new centenarian joined their ranks, Paula Holmes, a retired Tucson architect. AZPM contributing producer Laura Markowitz sat down to hear about Holmes' remarkable life, from the jazz age to the digital age and beyond.
Imagine what life was like a century ago. The roaring 20s with jazz, flappers, prohibition, Charlie Chaplin, the Scopes monkey trial. Women had only recently won the right to vote. So if you were born a middle-class white girl in Ohio, you were expected to grow up to be a wife and a mother.
I was never called a tomboy, but I surely was. I did not like dolls, and I did not play with dolls, and I didn't want Santa Claus to bring me a doll, and my mother was just stressed out.
Paula Francine Schatzman was born in Cleveland in 1925.
I did everything the boys did, and I played football in the streets, and I could kick the football over the utility lines before the guys could. But they didn't mind. They just laughed at me. I thought I could do anything a guy could do because I had an older brother, and I did everything he did, so I thought I was set.
During the Great Depression, her father lost his job as a production engineer. So they moved to the family farm in southern Ohio.
The best years of my life were the Depression years. I learned about butchering and how to wring a chicken's neck and how to can, and I just learned so much during the Depression that I've used my whole life. I mean, I've canned my whole life. If I, see something that's a bargain and it's, a peck of tomatoes for 10 cents, I buy them and can them. And, of course, on the farm, we had to grow everything, and we had a wonderful garden, and I learned how to grow things, and everywhere I've lived, I've had a garden. The barns we played in were all tobacco barns, and I loved the smell of tobacco, and I thought, this has to be good. And, of course, the tobacco raisers would roll their cigars out in the field and smoke them, and they smelled so wonderful, so I tried one, and, of course, I got sick as a dog, so that ended my smoking career. I never smoked. Didn't taste like chocolate.
Paula was active in Girl Scouts. She was the class president, and she loved to build things in the wood shop.
When I went to high school, they had to have classes that would teach the boys something they would need for the military because they knew they would all be going to the military. So I took aeronautical engineering drafting.
When she was 16, the United States entered World War II. She graduated from high school in 1943.
And I wanted to do something for the war effort. This experimental institute needed a draftsman to do all their government research on weapons and military equipment and so forth. And so I got a job drawing up rockets and all the detail of that. And Battelle Memorial Institute, and everybody there was an engineer. So I worked at that job until the war was over, and then I applied to Purdue.
She was the only woman in her engineering class.
And the men resented me. So it was very difficult because I felt I had to be first in the class to show them up. And so I was very stressed out.
When it came time for the civil engineering students to go to their summer training camp, Paula was told that there were no facilities for women.
And I said, well, what are you going to do with me? And they said, we'll just have you live with the faculty family. And I thought, well, that's not going to be any fun. Is my career going to be, always put someplace else because I'm the only woman? So I decided that instead of civil engineering, I'd go into architecture and do a more beautiful, easy part of the field. It's half engineering and half art, so you have to be skilled in both.
She transferred to Ohio State, and she worked summers as a draftsman for a local architecture firm in Columbus. She says the architects there encouraged her and taught her how to supervise on construction sites.
I needed to know that side of it too, because I needed to know how to talk to contractors when they'd made a mistake or had to change something, which of course they didn't like, especially coming from a woman.
Before she even graduated, Paula had a job offer from the firm. So she bought a Plymouth hatchback and took a month off to drive across the country with a friend. It was 1949.
And we visited every single national park. We would camp and we would hike the trails, and it was just a fabulous experience.
For the next few years, she worked as an architect and lived with her parents. Paula says her mother assumed she'd be an old maid.
Because I wasn't interested in men. I had had enough of men after studying with them for, 7 years, and then all I had in the office were, 6 more men.
But at age 28, she agreed to go on a blind date with a medical student named Donald Holmes.
He was a very, very unique man. When he was a teenager, his goal was to learn a new word every day. So he had the most beautiful language. It was just like poetry. And then he was busy in medical school and I was busy in architecture, and he wrote me maybe 4 words every single day in a little envelope and mailed them to me. And they were 4 precious words, and it just enamored me, and I just couldn't believe this man with this beautiful language. So I fell in love with him. I was surprised, but I did. I fell in love with him head over heels. He was just fabulous. And of course, he could figure me out because he was a psychiatrist, so he knew all about me, and he knew what he had to put up with. I didn't want to give up my profession.
They had 2 sons, Rob and Todd.
I was always so grateful that I had sons because they liked to play the same way I liked to play. Rocking horses and rocking dinosaurs, and every toy they had I made. Their little table where they crayoned and colored, and little chairs I made for them were made so they could build trains out of them.
Paula and Don had to figure out how to make it possible for her to continue practicing architecture while raising 2 young children. They didn't have role models for this. She had an office at home, and she was designing residences for families.
When my husband came home at 7, he'd take over, and I'd go to my office, and I'd work on the drawing board until 4 in the morning. And of course, the clients liked that because I could see them at night when the husbands were there. The husbands were paying the bill, and it was nice that they were in on, the design and the cost and all that sort of thing. So it worked out very well for me. And my husband would take the boys Friday night, pack them in the car and take off, and he'd take them for rides and adventures on the weekends while I had full time in my study doing drawings.
Paula won awards for her lighting and residence designs, and she was accepted into the prestigious American Institute of Architects. In 1970, the Holmes family moved to Carefree and then to Tucson.
We never ate dinner at the dining room table. We ate the dinner in the desert to see some beautiful area that the boys had found. And then we'd name these canyons. And then we'd have birthday parties out there. And the birthday parties were always filet mignon with my 6-candle sterling silver candelabras out in the desert in the sand.
Don passed away in 1999. He was 74.
That's been very sad years ever since that, because we worked hard and we played hard, and we had a wonderful life together.
Paula kept going.
I worked until I was 85, and at 85 I was doing a big job for a contractor here, and I had to go down to the building department to get a permit. So I opened the door and there was no one in there, and usually there's a big long line and you have to sign up and wait. Here's a big sign that says, "We're digital only." And I wasn't born the right generation for digital. And so I said, well, I guess that ends my career. And I was very sad about that.
She continued to do small renovation designs for friends
But I had to give that up when I was in my 90s.
Arthritis made it impossible for her to hold a pencil.
And I miss all my tools even today, but you can look in every drawer full of tools. My walker's full of tools because I can't open anything. So I've got pliers and steak knives and you name it in my walker so I can get into things. Packaging is my nemesis. Older age is more difficult. Everything is more difficult. You slow down. You become a procrastinator. You like to sit more, which is a no-no. And when you've been as active as I have, it's pretty upsetting when you have to have somebody come and open the door for you, or open a can of tuna.
She will celebrate her 100th birthday on March 24th. Everyone asks her what's her secret to living a happy life. And she says, enjoy people, have as much fun as possible, and do what you love, because you may end up doing it for a long time. Happy birthday, Paula Holmes. For Arizona Spotlight, this is Laura Markowitz.
The documentary called Final Vows tells about a small order of cloistered nuns who live at Santa Rita Abbey, an isolated monastery in the Arizona high desert. While dwindling recruitment and old age threaten the order's long-term survival, the monastery also stands in the path of copper mines that could be dug just south of the Grand Canyon. Following the lives of the sisters who lived there for more than 4 years of filming, Final Vows marks the directorial debut of Victoria Westover, building on her vibrant career as a film producer and programmer of festivals, including Cinema Tucson.
I was raised Catholic, even though at a very young age I decided it wasn't for me. But I was educated by nuns from 1st through 12th grade. So I was always fascinated by nuns. And when I was a teenager in the 70s, Gloria Steinem was saying I could be anything I wanted to be. And I knew someone who was choosing to become a nun at a very young age, and I didn't understand. And I was like, why would you do that? It felt like a very anti-feminist choice. So when I decided I was going to direct my first documentary, it just came on like a light bulb moment. It's going to be about nuns.
So introduce our audience a little bit to the monastery. How big is the order? What do you primarily want people to know about them that's sort of background to the documentary?
The nuns at Santa Rita Abbey are actually very few. When we started making the film, there were 12 nuns. We filmed over a 4.5-year period. It took probably about 6 years to make the film, from research to post-production. And in that time period, they have lost nuns. It's sad to see. The film is very much about just what this life is in this place, because it's not a world that we would have access to. So there's cloistered nuns and there's active order nuns. And the active order nuns are in hospitals and schools and, work with the poor. And the cloistered nuns stay in their abbey and support themselves, pray for the world, pray for others. And we just started with conversations about what our intentions were and what we were doing. And we met with all the nuns, and we met individually with the abbess. And when I say we, I took with me my cinematographer and my sound person and a producer, because I wanted them to meet the whole team. They were trepidatious, but they were willing to give it a go. So I think that's really interesting. And I'm so grateful to them that they were willing to trust us. But I have to say, it really probably took a couple of years to really fully earn the trust.
There's the looming threat of the expansion of the Rosemont mine and what that could mean. And a couple of the sisters have some things to say about that.
Yeah, and we wanted to include that in the film. And it's very tragic because, it's been years and, they're inching and inching to success, I'm afraid. But, and that place is, for the nuns, it is heaven in the desert. But for all of us, it's, it's really, Santa Ritas are gorgeous. We have asked the folks from Save the Scenic Santa Ritas to be with us on the evening of the screening so that they can give an update and provide some literature if people want to get on board with helping to save the beautiful Santa Ritas.
Explain the title of the film for the audience. What does Final Vows mean?
To become a nun, at least in this particular order, but in a lot of orders, it actually takes many years. It's not a simple process. You have a long time to decide, and you take a series of vows. So there's a series of steps of vows. And in the film, you see, we have that one sister who goes from, not being a nun at all to taking her first vows and wearing her white habit. But by the time you make your final vows, that's when, and that's what they're actually called, your final vows, that's when you become the full-fledged sister. And it doesn't mean that you can't ever leave. It's not a cult. You can leave whenever you want, even after you've made your final vows. It speaks to the commitment that these women make to live in this community.
One sister that I'd like you to tell our audience about, though, is Sister Hildegard.
Well, Sister Hildegard was a real gift to us for the film. She had such an interesting story because she had wanted to be a nun ever since she was a little girl. So she entered, I think, around 18, and she was sent to a abbey in France. So she didn't say why she wanted to leave the abbey in France. She, I think, always struggled with the language, for one thing. So she asked to be reassigned to another abbey that was English-speaking. Now, she had no choice where she was sent. And she was sent to Arizona. And it was a huge culture shock for her. She really struggles at the beginning, but by the end of the film, she feels so at home, and she feels that this is her place for life. She really opens up to us, especially. She was very hesitant at first when we started filming her, because she also had struggled with the language, because she hadn't been speaking English in so long. But by the end of our 4.5 years together, she was dancing. Yeah, and we were lucky to catch that. That's one of her forms of prayer.
She also seems to become very active in the handyman necessities around the place, working with the cellarists. Is that the correct word?
Yeah, Sister Pam.
Yeah,
the cellarist.
Sister Pam is another standout because she described herself, at least through her father's opinion of her, that she was the lazy daughter who just wanted to sit and read. And now she is the take care of everything. She's the jack of all trades.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So that's the other thing, coming into this abbey, and we would think that you're coming in and you just have a life of prayer, but no, they take on a lot of responsibility. She also takes on social media and.
I also had to laugh, Victoria, at a kind of almost metatextual moment where it's Christmas and there's been a snow and we see Sister Pam and another making snow angels.
Yeah, that's their idea of fun. I thought that was such an adorable scene.
But I did really enjoy the movie. And, honestly, I don't think I expected to.
I'm glad
nice
you
surprise.
did. Yeah, I mean, you never know what you're going to make when you make a documentary in the style that we made, which was, mostly observational, and you go in and you explore. It's not the type of documentary that's storyboarded and, you know exactly what you're doing. I think, we learned a lot in the process of making the film. I learned a lot, but I think they learned a lot, too, about filmmaking. So that was, a sort of fun partnership.
Yeah.
I really do feel like the film was a partnership. It's a film that turned out very sympathetic to the nuns, and I don't know that that's what I intended at the beginning. I'm just really glad that they were all so honest with us about their feelings and their struggles so that we could make a film that wasn't just everything's great down here and it's great being a nun. We really did show, that a lot of them do struggle with the decision and the choice. And so I'm really grateful to them that they were that honest with us.
Director Victoria Westover's documentary, Final Vows, can be streamed on several platforms, including Amazon and Vimeo, as well as DocuSeek for educational purposes. We have links on the Spotlight page at azpm.org. Now here to share his thoughts on Final Vows is film essayist Chris DeShiel. He is an outside contributor to this show, and his opinions are his own.
About 50 miles south of Tucson is the Santa Rita Abbey, a Trappist monastery in Sonoyta, and there lives a small community of nuns. The order's purpose is to devote one's life completely to God and requires vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. Their lives exist largely out of sight, away from the curious and outsiders in general. Film director Victoria Westover got interested and got inside, gaining the trust of the nuns over a 4.5-year period, a remarkably patient process by which to make a movie. The film is called Final Vows, and it's showing at the Fox Theater on September 8th. The reason it's called Final Vows, I think, is that joining the order means committing to staying in that monastery for the rest of one's life. As one of the nuns explains, She had experienced many of the normal events, joys, and setbacks of life, but there was something missing. She wanted God, and for her that meant putting all those things aside in order to live a contemplative life, a life of prayer, devotion, and service. The first thing you might notice about the film is that it's very quiet. There is no musical score. This is entirely fitting because silence and stillness are an important element in a cloistered way of life. The movie wisely echoes the nuns' practice in its visual style as well. We experience the spatial dimension of the abbey as something that feels peaceful. The modest rooms and hallways are shown in medium shots, with the camera often stopping to simply observe the sisters as one element of their humble surroundings. They don't rush, they don't talk or read while they eat. It's all determined by a steady attention to and remembrance of Jesus. Staying in the community doesn't mean always being inside. The abbey is in a beautiful area of high desert with golden grasslands, surrounded by mountains, including the Santa Ritas to the west. The nuns walk through this landscape with evident joy. They are visited by deer that are clearly unafraid, and one of the sisters calls a certain one sweetie and feeds it little treats when it approaches. Westover was able to get the nuns to open up about life in the monastery. They talk about how and why they chose the contemplative life and what it's like. We see them at work. They have a business making unleavened bread and operating machines that cut the bread into round wafers to be used in Holy Communion by Catholic churches around the country. Most of them are elderly, some in their 90s. The Mother Superior tells us that fewer younger women are choosing to take vows, resulting in shrinking numbers. She doesn't speculate about anything further. An interesting sidelight is that the controversial proposed Rosemont mine is near the monastery. It's mentioned a few times as something the sisters adamantly oppose as a threat to the beautiful environment where the abbey is located. But as cloistered nuns, they aren't marching in protests. What they do is pray. They pray specifically that the plans for mining in the Santa Ritas will not succeed. Final Vows is a thoughtful and absorbing glimpse into a way of life that is usually hidden. The respect that it shows towards this community allows us to see the world in some fashion, the way these devout women do. For Arizona Spotlight, this is Krista Shield.
The Tucson nonprofit Literacy Connects sponsors a group of performers and musicians called Stories That Soar. They help young writers realize the power and potential of bringing their stories to life. This feel-good tale of acceptance and connection was written by Kimberly, a fifth-grade student at Robeson Magnet School. It's called Rainbow Frog.
One day, there was a rainbow frog named Elijah. Elijah hung out with girl frogs and rarely hung out with boy frogs. But one day, Elijah saw a nice-looking boy frog. He wanted to be his friend. But there was one problem. The boy frog was crowded by other frogs. That made Elijah a little upset. But someone tapped on Elijah's back. He looked back and saw the nice-looking boy frog. Elijah stuttered his name, which made the frog laugh, which made Elijah smile. And they became friends. And years later, they started dating. The end.
That was Rainbow Frog, written by Kimberly, a fifth grader at Robeson Magnet School. Go Roadrunners. It was produced by the Stories That Soar creative team at Literacy Connects. Thank you for listening to Arizona Spotlight. This show is a production of AZPM. The production engineer is Jim Blackwood. Production assistance by Zoe Giuliano. I'm producer and host Mark McLemore.
AZPM podcasts are made possible in part by donations from listeners like you. Learn more at support.azpm.org. Thank you.